Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Radio Rama, and today we have a mission bell. It says mission bell, but you know what? It sure as hell looks like a Motorola. It's got the same cabinet shape, it's got the same knobs, and what little I can see in here, it's got the same, I know you can't see it probably. It sure looks like it's got Motorola style IF and RF transformers on it. So I'm going to take the back off and see what's inside. Well, according to this, it's a Hoffman. Okay, I'll admit it's not a Motorola, but it sure as hell looks very, very, very close. And I don't really want to work on this right this minute because there is a sheet of asbestos in there, and I'd rather not disturb it until I'm in a better situation where I can. Why did they use this so much back? I guess they used it because it was a really good material, and they just didn't understand that at the end of the day, this stuff's pretty bad for you and causes all kinds of serious problems. Okay, so I decided to go ahead and remove it, but you got to take some precautions with this stuff. First of all, if you're not comfortable dealing with it, then just don't do it. Close it back up, put it on your shelf, enjoy. Because it is a hazardous material, and I'm not going to understate that. And the most critical thing is not to get the stuff airborne, so I just try to keep it wet, and then it needs to be put in. I usually seal it up in a plastic bag, and I have a container that has little packets of this stuff because you cannot throw it in the garbage. At least for now in the U.S., it is a crime to do so. So you need to take it to a hazardous waste handling facility, and it may or may not be the same in the country that you live. It may be more or less strict. I don't know. Just be aware of what you're dealing with. And again, if you don't feel comfortable, then don't deal with it. Just leave it alone. Okay, the asbestos is gone. It's all sealed up in plastic. So now that that thread is removed, let's see what it looks like under here. And there's like hardly anything in here. This has to be about the most basic radio ever known to man. Well, I guess it's not that basic, but looks like someone's been in here. They replaced... What do they do here? What the hell? Is it just one? This is so freaking bizarre. There's no way that there's just one electrolytic in here. It has to have two. So where's the other? Oh wait, I see what they've done. Never mind, never mind. This is one capacitor, and they've tied the leads of this one together, probably to combine them. So that's probably a replacement at some point as well. Looks like maybe it was, I don't think it was necessarily restored. I think it was repaired back in the day, because this looks like 50s, maybe 60s era type repairs. This guy's probably one of the most important as far as safety, because it is the two-line capacitor, meaning one side of the AC line goes directly through that capacitor. And boy, oh boy, you'd probably get a good wallop if you touch the chassis and ground at the same time on this. Let me see what the rating is. 0.2, 0.2 of a microfarad. So yeah, that would definitely more than tingle. The power cord is not safe, but it looks like it's not touching. I could maybe at least bring it up, see if it does anything. I'm going to guess this is late 40s. I'd probably know that if I just actually looked it up online versus guessing. But I'm saying that because we've got a mixture here. We've got a octal tube and then a bunch of miniatures. And I've seen this style of IF can before. It seems pretty emblematic of the late 40s. Again, this is why I thought it was a Motorola, because I've seen those with that same style. So I'm going to bring this up on my Variac. Actually, I'm not even going to bring it up. I'm just going to power it up and see what happens. I don't recommend you do that, hence the warning on my channel not to be a dumbass like me. Okay. I'm bringing it up and it's not drawing a whole lot of current, so that's good. That means it's... Just make sure I don't smell anything burning. Uh-oh. that sounds like radio.
Every ਮਿੰਟ ਕੋਈ ਨਵੀਂ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੂਗੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿਰਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਖਰਾਬ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਧੁਣ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਖਾ ਰਹੀ ਆ ਇਸ
All right, it does work, but I'm not going to run it for very long on those ancient capacitors. So that's nice. I like it when it's just like, okay, no problems, just overhaul, done. I'm actually kind of I'm licking my wounds right now because I've been working on 2 German stereos and they are being a pain in the ass. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to retreat for a couple of days and go back to AA5s. And check this out. I can't believe this thing worked with that capacitor like that. I don't know what I think. I think that might be the cross the line cap. So it'd still work. Anyway, let me replace these guys. Now, these electrolytics it's all pretty straightforward stuff. A lot of times you'll just see the values written on it. I'm not even worried about that. I'm going to put 2 47 microfarad, 160 volt rated capacitors in here. And that just generically works for just about any AA5. If you're real persnickety about it, you can go at or greater the capacitance and you'll be fine. Meanwhile, the rest of these are paper caps and they all have their values written on them. And you get really good at reading things upside down. It says 0.005. Sometimes you have to twist them around and scrape the wax off. And that one says 0.001, 600 volts DC, working voltage. That's the across the line cap, so I need to replace that with an across the line capacitor. And this is the 2 ground capacitor, and that needs to be replaced with a much smaller value and a much different type of capacitor. And it's really critical here that you make sure that when you replace your electrolytics, you observe their polarities. And on most AA5s, they're not grounded to chassis for obvious reasons. They're grounded instead to a floating ground here. Floating because the ground is actually that and not that. So you won't get the crap shocked out of you in case you decide to touch the back of the radio, even though you'd have to be kind of stupid to do it. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it's not like the airways were filled of stories of people electrocuting themselves on Uncle Harry's radio at dinner time.
ਉਹੀ ਤਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਿਆਣੇ ਕੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਊਡ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਨਸ਼ਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਲਾਤੇ ਹੀ ਸਰਿੰਜਾਂ ਖਵੋ ਕੇ ਜਵਾਨੀ ਮਰ ਗਈ ਸ਼ਰਨਜੀਤ ਜੀ ਮੈਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਦੇਖੋ ਸਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ ਨਸ਼ੇ ਤੇ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ.
Okay, well, here is the recapping job. You're wondering why I'm using this giant one here. It's because I'm starting to run out of my smaller ones. And I have an order, but I don't know where it's at. Who knows? Anyhow, I learned a valuable lesson amongst many lessons that I should have learned years and years ago, which is, so I replaced the cord on this. I was ready to plug it in and try it out because I was like, well, it's all rebuilt and everything, no problem. And I plugged it in and immediately my breaker just snapped. No smoke or nothing, just bam. I was like, what did I just do? What I plugged in wasn't the cord to the radio. Instead, I plugged in this other cord that had the ends twisted together. So I guess my breaker works really well, and there was nothing. It was like dink, and that was it. So keep your cords separated. So now that, see, I just about did it again. I just about plugged the old cord in, throw it in the floor. So here's the real plug. I'm going to plug it in. And, wow, see, I was about to say it's not shorting out. Well, obviously it wouldn't have shorted out because it wasn't the radio that was the cord that was plugged in. Jesus. I must have taken stupid pills this morning. All right. Please work. I feel way too confident in myself right now for it to not work. There we go.
Diversity until there is the Lord is with me.
Ja, hij gaat ook op zijn.
All right, it works. So what I'm going to do next is flip it over, or maybe do a little cleaning. Well, it's a little discolored and semi-corroded, but that's okay. It's 80 years old. But I did clean it up a little bit. But now what I'm going to do is oil the bearings for the tuning condenser. These came with a little bit of grease from the factory, which is long ago dried up. Likewise, what I try to do is just get a little scotch on anything that moves, and it'll just make everything like that. Already feels better. I think what you want to do is maybe just, I'm not saying do this, but I'm filming it, so I just get a little oil, my finger, and it'll make the little indicator slide a little bit better. And then the last thing I do, it's real key not to get it on the string, by the way, I'll put a little bit in the back. And what'll happen, that'll eventually kind of creep its way in, so sometimes I'll just start working it back and forth a little bit. And you'll feel it just get a little bit easier. You don't have to do that. Get this last little bit of dust off of here. But it just feels a little bit nicer to the end user. Sorry, I worked in the tech industry for too long. Looks like that was getting hung up a little bit right there. Okay, good, that misses that. So now that I've got the electronics done, I'm going to work on the cabinet, which has some staining and a black stain on the side that I hope I can remove. Well, I'm going to work on the cabinet just a little bit. This is my biggest concern. I hate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be real gentle. I'm going to use this feed and wax, and it's got orange oil in it. I'm hoping the orange oil will kind of like slowly dissolve that black stuff. In fact, I'm just going to kind of, I know it looks horrible. It looks like I'm smearing snot all over this. I'm just going to let that hang out there for a while. And the rest of this, I'm just going to get a paper towel and fuck, knocked over all my paper towels on the floor. Anyway, I don't want to use anything that has color in this because this is a blonde finish. And so I'm just using this wax, beeswax material. It's already looking a little bit better. I think the finish actually is in not bad shape. It's definitely not flaky. It's just a little weathered. You know, I remember when this thing came in, I was like, you know, that is a stunning looking radio. I like the way that looks, and I still like it, and I like it even more now that it's cleaned up a little bit. I don't think I'm going to be able to get all that stain out of there. I've tried a bunch of different things, and I don't want to try to mimic whatever they've done with this finish. It's like some sort of, I don't know how you do a blonde finish. I have no clue how it's done. I'm guessing it's a semi-opaque finish of some sort. One of you people that knows about refinishing furniture, you can let me know. But I think it looks great. I'm going to not do anything else to the finish. I just wanted to clean it up. But I do need to repair some things in here. Whoever had it last drove screws that were way too big, and they split both of these. So I'm going to glue that back together again. And then we've got some loose joints in here. I'm just going to fill those with glue. I'm not going to try to disassemble it. And I'll show you my stupid jerry-rigged technique of doing that in just a minute. Okay, here is my redneck way of dealing with loose, wiggly cabinets. Ones where I'm afraid to take them apart because I'm afraid I'll damage them. So I had kind of like wiggled the joints, and I kind of force glue into it. You can use your finger. Sometimes I use a business card or whatever. Just try to get it in every little joint, and then make sure and wipe off your excess. That's why I put the oil on the cabinet first, because it'll wipe off better. Clean it up a little bit, and I'll clamp it up, and then it'll be good and tight. That, ladies and gentlemen, is redneck engineering at its very finest. So I have this like crudely cut piece of cross tie, a railroad tie, cut into an anvil that someone gave me years ago. Actually, I was at a flea market. selling radios, and I was eyeballing it earlier in the day, and I was like, how much you want for that? And he's like, 20 bucks. And I was like, oh, okay. Thanks, man. I was like, I really don't need that. And then at the end of the day, he was leaving. He was like, hey, you want it? I was like, yeah. And it's going to sound stupid and jerry-rigged, but whatever. What I also use it for is when I'm almost out of spray paint, I'll just like keep on spraying it. So it's probably got 100 coats of spray paint on it. Anyway, it's also a good weight, so when you can put it on top of radio cabinets, the ones that'll support it anyway, it'll squeeze all that new glue that I just put into all those open cracks together, and the cabinet will be good and solid again. And that way I don't feel too bad about someone picking it up and maybe having it fall apart in their hands, which happens with some of these kind of like chintzy constructed radio cabinets. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is add an audio input to this guy, and that consists of basically tying into the set's pre-existing volume control. The wrong way of doing it would be running a line directly into the volume control and then letting the audio from the incoming device cancel out the signal from the radio. Now maybe you can get away with that on a set that has a power transformer on it, but you cannot get away with that on a set that has a hot chassis, or even in this case a floating chassis, even when it's been fully lifted and has a much smaller grounding cap at the end. Nope, we need to make sure it's even more safe than that. So we're going to need to run that through a isolation transformer. And that isolation transformer will do exactly what its name implies, which is isolate the user electrically from any sort of potential current that they might somehow get through there on the other side of the volume control. It's a potential. What if something fails somewhere in this configuration? Now granted, they thought about that when they engineered this, because as you can see, well actually, is that right? Let me look here. Just getting ready to say, where's the other side? Okay, so they got this resistor here between you and the volume control. And that way you won't shock the crap out of yourself if you were to grab a hold of this. But anyway, we're going to hack into the set's volume control by temporarily making a little connection here. I'm going to run a little wire that will come out through the back, and then that way you can turn the radio signal on and off. And likewise, it's also where the incoming audio is going to come. And then it'll need to come through the isolation transformer before it comes through that wire. And I just realized that I might actually be out of isolation transformers. And if that's the case, it's too bad, because that means I have to go to the museum. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is probably going to be controversial, but in order to get the audio cable through here, I need to basically put a hole somewhere in the chassis. I really don't want to do it in the back where people are going to see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it through the top, and I'm going to put it, I think we're going to put it wait a minute. Let's look up here. Seems like there's quite a bit of space over here on the far left, but that's the volume control. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole right here, and I'll find a way maybe to route the cable You know, maybe I'm overthinking this. Let me look at this for just a minute more. I didn't quite make it through the restoration last night, but that's okay. Today I'm going to add the audio input feature, and after kind of looking and thinking about what I was thinking about last night, the problem is that you don't want to put your audio in such a way where it's going to possibly interfere with radio reception. And so that means you kind of want to keep your audio in materials as close as you can to the volume control, which is here. The problem is there's nowhere close for me to mount this transformer. I tried it here, I tried it there, it won't fit there, it won't fit here because there's a huge resistor here. And you get over here and it starts being too far away. That means I'd have to run audio cables all the way over this, which means running it over the top or the bottoms of all the RF stuff. And I really don't want to do that because it'll hum like crazy and it'll sound awful. So what I'm going to do instead is do what I was thinking about last night. I'm going to actually mount it here, and then I'll run the cabling probably in the cabinet in such a way where it's not going to get close to any of these tubes. These guys get hot. But the good news is these two are just the output and the rectifier. Granted, there's this triode here, but the cabling will be away from the remainder of all that, so it won't cause any interference. But to do so means taking this transformer and adding quite a few other elements to it. We need to split the right and left channels that are coming in into mono, or combine them rather, and we're going to do that through a pair of these 30-something ohm resistors. And then we also need to make sure that when this is in circuit, that it doesn't interfere with the radio's reception or the fidelity of the radio audio, which we found these can. So I'm going to build kind of a little shunt that goes before this gets to the volume, and it's going to be in the form of this little capacitor and about a 270K resistor, because these are about 500 ohm, 550K, and you want to use a resistor it's about half the value of it, thereabouts. It's not rocket science. It's not super, doesn't have to be super accurate, just somewhere in that neighborhood. And what I do to make it easier, I pre-build these setups so that I can just mount them in, and it's a lot easier instead of doing it in the set, which I used to do, which is certainly not easy. I always have a hard time filming this because it's so little, but so you see the red and the white and the yellow wires. Well, that's your incoming audio, and that's going to this cord here that has a Bluetooth on the end of it. I usually make it about 2 or 3 feet. You don't need it that long. And those two the red and the white are our right and left channels, and those are tied into a pair of 30-odd ohm resistors. And then the grounded side of the audio goes on the other side of the secondary part of the isolation transformer. There's nothing scientific about it. I mean, there's nothing complicated about this at all. It doesn't matter which side of those pins you choose, and you probably have an entire wad of wire containing many isolation transformers hidden inside, and that comes in the form of all those annoying wall warts in your house. So if you're like me and you have a whole ton of them sitting around, there's a good chance that you could crack one open if you're not using it anymore. And what you'll look for is something like 120 volts in and anywhere from 5 to 24 volts out. And the 24 volts out is your secondary, and your primary is your 110 outlet side. So we're doing exactly the same thing. I just bought these in bulk. They're for a welding supply company. But anyway, the other side is our primary, and that's going to go to their volume control. And it has this little shunt to prevent the transformer from causing an issue with radio reception. And what I've done is I've alligator clipped it in, and I temporarily removed the lead coming off of the volume control that was running the radio signal, and I'll eventually run a little switch with a wire out the back. But before I button this up, I want to make sure it actually worked. And that's running off my Bluetooth. Is it the most amazing audio? No, of course it isn't. But you know, you're not buying this because you're wanting to invite your audiophile friends over to listen to it. It's like, look, boys, it's a 4 1/4 speaker. Wow. No, you're doing it because it looks cool and it's a novelty. I mean, maybe you could use it in your kitchen. Oh yeah, speaking of other things, I did come out here this morning and remove the weight, and this all glued back together real nice and tight. There's no more cracks or loose fittings. That's good. These plywood things. You know what I did forget to do though? I forgot to glue those. In fact, I should probably do that while I'm finishing up the radio so it can be curing while I do that. Okie dokie. Got it installed here. And what I did is I really roughened up the metal and then the underside of the transformer, and then I used a super glue gel. If you're wondering what all that stuff is on the top, what I do is I cover these in an epoxy so that if this ever breaks free and it rattles around in there, nothing that is potentially exposed, such as any of those electrical contacts, is going to hit anything. But I never had one of these come loose, and I mean, that super glue is a lot better than it used to be. So anyway, the primary runs in through the volume control here, And the black wire is on the bottom of the volume control, which is, you see these 3 lugs, you see those brass things with the round rivets on the volume control, and there's 3. The brown wire goes down to the bottom, which is the incoming radio signal, and then there's a switch wire that's connected between that resistor and the bottom, well, the top of the volume control, and that switch wire comes out the back. I found a hole that was already there, and I'll attach a little switch here. So this way, there's no holes drilled in the chassis, so if someone gets this and they want to return it back to original, they can. So sad singing country songs. I'm from that neck of the world, and I remember when I was a kid, it seemed like the kids on the bus were directly split down the middle between country and, I can't remember if it was rap or rock and roll, but the rap and rock and roll would have a day on the bus, and the country kids would have like the country music station on. And I don't know, this is me, but I think by the time the 80s and 90s rolled around, that's when pop country started going to the dumps. And y'all can get mad at me if you want. I don't know. I'll give me Johnny Cash, or even some of the upstart Americana alt country musicians today that are, in my opinion, singing the kind of country music that people like old Hank and Lefty might have sung back in the day. Anyway, I'll get off my high horse. Now that we've got the electronics 100% done, I can go over and see what's going on with the cabinet to see if it's set as far as the glue goes. You know, maybe I'm going to sit it out in the sun. It's kind of warm out there, and let that kind of get it settled for a little bit.
She just has to touch my cup. Yeah. She's my sugar, sweet when
Now take the whole coast from right there instead of Frank coming out. 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, I got the radio done. That's the Bluetooth, obviously. There's not much to listen to on radio anymore around here anyway. So here we go.
Hotels near the airport is going up to $30 an hour.
So they teach what's in.
Our passion is taxes and helping individuals.
Africans. President Trump will meet with Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, next week, following allegations that genocide was being committed against white Afrikaners.
Such bullshit. Like we have a joke for a president.
Difficult, given the is now in.
I'm just so grateful for the charity we've seen.
On that note, I would highly recommend checking out the latest performance from Bruce Springsteen over at Manchester, England. Quite a thing he said there, which I think a lot of us are thinking right now. Anyway, I guess I got a little bit political there, but that's okay. It's my channel, and if you don't like it, you don't have to watch. Anyhow, this turned out great. I really like the way the finish looks on it. Again, these blonde finishes are really susceptible to UV damage, so a lot of times these would be sitting in the house next to a window or someplace like that, and the finish would just come stripped right off. Anyhow, thanks so much for watching this episode of Radiorama. Maybe you learned a thing or two, or maybe you got to watch me act like an idiot as usual. But either way, that concludes the episode, and thank you so much for watching. Until the next time a radio comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys later. Adios.